the old covenant as a way to be saved, as a way to be marked as the people of God. How are the people of God marked? By Christ. So Jew and Gentile now are part of the people of God. So the temple is no longer necessary. The temple is not the place in which God is communing with humanity. God communes with humanity through the intersection of God and man. Who is the intersection of God and man? We just talked about this earlier, right? Christ, who is truly God and truly man. Christ is our bridge to the Father. So, the Jews were revolting against the Roman Empire at the time. They were subjects of the Roman Empire, and they were pushing against not wanting to be under these pagan rulers, right? The Romans were pagans. They had multiple gods. They didn't much care, like if you worshipped your own little gods, they were fine with you worship your own gods, as long as you worshipped Caesar himself as well. The Jews had an exception where they said, well, okay, because they have an ancient faith, so Romans and a lot of people respected very ancient religions. So if a religion had been around for thousands of years, they're like, okay, well, we'll let you worship the way you worship. The compromise was you have to pray for Caesar to your God. And so that was sort of the deal that was made. What ends up happening is, of course, the revolt happens, and we'll get into some of that with the White Horsemen, and the Romans are tired of these constant revolts that are happening. About a dozen, quote, messiahs before the incarnation of Christ and after the incarnation of Christ can be found. So you've got dozens of people claiming to be the Messiah. So let's look at this first seal. And where are we at now? Let me see. Okay. All right. With that understood, we've got this first seal. So we're seeing a prediction of the destruction of the temple is the idea of what I'm getting at here. The first seal is the white horseman, the first of four. This is representing false messiahs prior to and after the true Messiah. There are dozens of such before and after our Lord. So here are a few that I was able to find up. There are two that I think are, kind of all four of these are kind of important, but I think one particular is pretty important, and another one is kind of exemplary as well. First one, Simon of Perea. This is 4 BC, 4 years before the birth of Christ. A tall, charismatic slave of Herod the Great who, after Herod's death, crowned himself king, burned palaces, and led peasant revolts. The Roman forces then beheaded him. Judas of Galilee, when our Lord is just a little kid, not much more than a toddler. Leader of the Zealot movement after the Quirinius census. Now, the Zealots, we're going to talk about them a little bit here. He founded the fourth philosophy, which is known as the Zealots, advocating violent resistance to Roman taxation. Josephus, who is he's a first century Jewish, non-Christian Jewish author, historian. He was a general too, part of the revolt against the Romans. He was captured. They deemed him too smart to kill him, so they kept him as a historian, and he wrote. This is actually why we know so much, part of why we know so much about the destruction of the temple and all that sort of stuff. And we'll get into that, especially in the weeks to come. Josephus notes, Judas's followers caused widespread rebellion. He died in the uprising, Judas that is, but his sons continued his false messianic militancy. This is Judas, not the Judas Iscariot, by the way, different Judas. His, I think, grandson we're going to see soon. Menahem ben Judah, AD 66. This is around the time that we're talking about, right? AD 70, prepping up for this. Grandson of Judas of Galilee, this zealot assassin seized Masada's armory, armed rebels, and styled himself king during the Jewish revolt's early phase. His followers hailed him as the Messiah until rival factions murdered him. not Roman factions, rival Jewish factions murdered him in Jerusalem's internecine strife. All right. And then you see my note, see the Red Horseman. We're going to get to that in a second. Then, this one is about, 60 years after or so. Simon Bar Kokhba, there. AD 132 to 135. He led the Bar Kokhba revolt. This one was the most successful out of all the revolts during this time period. Against Hadrian's Rome. Rabbi Akiva declared him son of the star. We see that as a reference to Numbers 24:17. He ruled a semi-independent Judea for 3 years before Roman legions crushed the rebellion, killing him and decimating the population yet again. All right. So, what do all four of these have in common?
They're violent.
Very violent political uprisings. What is the Messiah we know? What is his approach? Did he give a political, violent uprising against the Romans, against the rulers? No. He conquered a much more important enemy. Well, 2 enemies, 3 enemies. Sin, the death and the devil, right? So, these all fail because they're not going after the right enemy. My enemy is not the Romans. My enemy is not anything other than sin, death, and the devil. Now, people commit themselves and ally themselves with those evils, and we are called to resist against them. We are called to also convert, bring them to Christ. Ultimately, every single human we see is someone we are called to bring to Christ. So, that's the first seal. And let's see how much time we have left. Okay. The second seal. The Red Horseman is referring to the infighting of the Jewish sects in the Roman Jewish battles of AD 67 to 68. So, we see this infighting, this sort of civil war that's happening in the second seal. That's again referring to especially Menahem. Then, the third seal, the Black Horseman, is referring to the famine and extreme economic upheaval of the events leading to and during the destruction of the temple. So we see this idea of luxury items for the rich were still widely available, but food was almost impossible to find. In fact, there are some very disturbing accounts of cannibalism and such written by Josephus about the destruction of the temple, the destruction of Jerusalem, the siege of Jerusalem. The fourth seal, the Pale Horseman. Death is followed by Hades, the grave. The historian Josephus estimates as many as over 1 million, 1.1 million, were killed during the Roman Jewish War of AD 69 and 70. The Roman Jewish War leads to the destruction of the temple, which is a pivotal moment in history. It signifies that God's redemption is through his Son. We are not saved by the power of our own swords, by the power of our own abilities. We are saved by the power of Christ. The fifth seal. This one is the martyrs in heaven are crying out to God, asking for vengeance for them, right? And are given white robes and told to wait a little longer until their brothers in the faith join them. Now, there are a few different things here. The first part is, this is an indication, I think this is, because there is this idea that, for some people, try to have this idea that the resurrection has already happened. I think this is part of why this passage is here, to point out that the resurrection has not yet happened, right? So the martyrs are still in heaven crying out to God, waiting for the resurrection, waiting for the triumph and vengeance, ultimate triumph. The ultimate triumph over death happens at the cross, with the resurrection, I mean. And then we are joined in that victory through the general resurrection, is the point. But there's still a little bit more waiting. Some more martyrs are to be had. Christians were persecuted heavily under Emperor Nero. This is circa AD 64. This is also around the time that St. Paul is beheaded. These are and Saint Peter. These are the martyrs from those persecutions, though likely not exclusively. These martyrs that we're talking about. The seal indicates that the resurrection has not yet happened. And the final seal. There's a lot of cosmic imagery that's given here, and we see that a lot in the book of Revelation. That is for a reason. We're going to go more in depth into it as we go through the weeks. But we see stuff like the earthquakes, sun blotting, blood moons. How many of us have heard that term before? Blood moons, right? Falling stars, etc. These are not meant to be taken as a woodenly literal set of events. It is not like if you had a video camera of the moments that St. John is talking about, you'll see that. That's not how it works. That would actually cause problems for us, because if we're talking about these things, some of this is like kind of, it doesn't work physically, right? So this is cosmic language meant to convey the idea of seismic shifts in the life of the world. These are cataclysmic events. These are pointing to cataclysmic events. The big one is, of course, the destruction of Jerusalem, the siege of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple specifically. This would be, again, akin to the entirety of DC being destroyed. This would shake our faith in our government. This shakes the faith of the Jews in their understanding and approach to God. This is why a lot of Jews then convert to Christ. And we actually hope and there are some interpretations of it this way, that we hope and expect to see a mass conversion of Jews just prior to the return of Christ, when Christ returns and the general resurrection happens. So that's it. We don't quite have enough time for any questions. I'm so sorry. Well, I can maybe take one. Is there any one burning question or anything? All right, we're good. Thank you all very much.